Hi everyone, I hope you're all safe and healthy. Today we're going to look at Act 5, Scene 3. This is the final scene of Romeo and Juliet. And I want us to think about what makes this play, Romeo and Juliet, a tragedy. We know, based on the information from the prologue, that Romeo and Juliet die at the end. But today I want us to think about why they have to die, why it's considered a tragedy, and whose fault is it that their story ends the way that it does. So if you have your script, please open up to page 85. If you do not have your script, remember that you can find a copy in the class information and materials folder, or you can follow along on this video. So scene 2 ended with Friar John telling Friar Lawrence that he was unable to deliver the letter to Romeo that told him Juliet was in a death-like sleep and will be waiting for him in the Capulet tomb. Romeo received word from a servant, Balthasar, that Juliet is dead, and so he decides to travel back to Verona and kill himself in Juliet's tomb so that they can finally be together. So we're going to take a look at this last scene that begins with Count Paris. Remember that he was supposed to marry Juliet earlier this morning, but they had found her dead. So let's take a look on page 85.
Give me thy torch, boy. Hence and stand aloof. Yet put it out, for I would not be seen. Under yond yew tree lay thee all along, holding thy ear close to the hollow ground. So shall no foot upon the churchyard tread, being loose, unfirm, with digging up of graves, but thou shalt hear it. Whistle then to me a signal that thou hearest something approach. Give me those flowers. Do as I bid thee, go. I'm almost afraid to stand alone here in the churchyard. I will adventure. Sweet flower, with flowers thy bridal bed I strew. Oh woe, thy canopy is dust and stones, which with sweet water nightly I will dew, or wanting that with tears distilled by moans. The obsequies that I for thee will keep nightly shall be to strew thy grave and weep.
So let's take a look at the modern translation so we can understand exactly what is going on with Paris. So remember that he was supposed to marry Juliet, and late at night, once obviously everyone leaves the burial ground, Paris returns. And we learn a little bit about how he's feeling. So this type of dialogue is a soliloquy. So let's take a look at what he says. He tells his page, "Give me your torch, boy. Go away and stay apart from me. Put the torch out so I can't be seen. Hide under the yew trees over there. Listen to make sure no one is coming through the graveyard. If you hear anyone, whistle to me to signal that someone is approaching. Give me those flowers. Do as I tell you. Go." And his page is a little afraid of being in the graveyard by himself, but he obeys. Then Paris begins to scatter the flowers at Juliet's tomb, and he calls her a sweet flower. And he says, "I'm spreading flowers over your bridal bed, O pain. Your canopy is dust and stones. I'll water these flowers every night with sweet water, or if I don't do that, my nightly rituals to remember you will be to put flowers on your grave and weep." And as he's saying this, the page whistles that someone is approaching. So this soliloquy helps us to understand how Paris is feeling. He obviously loved Juliet and was looking forward to being able to marry her. So the person approaching we can already identify as Romeo, but let's take a look and see if that's true. It could also be Friar Lawrence.
The boy gives warning, something doth approach. What cursed foot wanders this way tonight, to cross my obsequies and true love's right? One with a torch, not only night, a while.
So let's take a look at who actually approaches. So Paris moves away from the tomb, and Romeo and Balthasar, his servant, enter.
Give me that mattock in the wrenching iron. Hold. Take this letter. Early in the morning, see thou deliver it to my lord and father. Give me the light. Upon thy life I charge thee. Whate'er thou hearest or seest, stand all aloof, and do not interrupt me in my course. Why I descend into this bed of death is partly to behold my lady's face, but chiefly to take thence from her dead finger a precious ring, a ring that I must use in dear employment. Therefore hence be gone. But if thou, jealous, dost return to pry, and what I father shall intend to do, by heaven I will tear thee joint by joint, and strew this hungry churchyard with thy limbs. The time and my intents are savage, wild, more fierce and more inexorable far than empty tigers or the roaring sea. I will be gone, sir, and not trouble you. So shalt thou show me friendship. Take thou that. Live, and be prosperous, and farewell, good fellow.
So Romeo gives his servant some money and he tells him to leave, to go and have a good life with the money. Let's take a look at the modern translation to see what Romeo was talking about. He goes and he asks for the crowbar, and he also asks Balthasar to take a letter. He says, "Early in the morning, deliver it to my father, and give me the light." And he takes the torch from Balthasar. He says, "Swear on your life, I command you, whatever you hear or see, stay away from me, and do not interrupt me in my plan. I'm going down into the tomb of the dead, partly to behold my wife's face. But my main reason is to take a precious ring from her dead finger. I must use that ring for an important purpose. So go on your way. But if you get curious and return to spy on me, I swear I'll tear you apart limb by limb and spread your body parts around to feed the hungry animals in the graveyard. My plan is wild and savage. I am more fierce in this endeavor than a hungry tiger or the raging sea." So Romeo tells his servant, "You know I'm going to kill myself. Do not try and stop me. I want to be left alone." So he directs Balthasar to leave. And Balthasar takes the money and he says he is not going to trouble him. But take a look then at what happens. You take a look at the aside here. Remember, this is something that a character says that is not meant for another character to hear. Balthasar says, "For all this time, I'll hide here about. His looks I fear, and his intents I doubt." So Balthasar does not listen to Romeo, and instead of leaving, he decides to stay but hide.
For all the same, I'll hide me hereabout. His looks I fear, and his intents I doubt. Thou detestable maw, thou womb of death, gorged with the dearest morsel of the earth. Thus I enforce thy rotten jaws to open, and in despite I'll cram thee with more food. This is that banished haughty Montague that murdered my love's cousin, with which grief it is supposed the fair creature died, and who is come to do some villainous shame to the dead bodies. I will apprehend him. Stop thy unhallowed toil, vile Montague. Can vengeance be pursued further than death? Condemned villain, I do apprehend thee. Obey and go with me, for thou must die.
So Paris sees that Romeo is trying to break into the tomb, and he thinks he's going there to do something horrible to Juliet's body. He calls him a villain. And so he decides to step in and stop Romeo. Take a look at some of the things that Count Paris says. To Romeo, he says, "Stop your villain work, vile Montague. Can you take revenge on dead bodies? Condemned villain, I've caught you. Obey and come with me. You must die." to take a look at how Romeo responds.
Must indeed, and therefore came I hither, good gentle youth, tempt not a desperate man. Fly hence and leave me, think upon these gone, let them affright thee, I beseech thee, youth. Put not another sin upon my head by urging me to fury. Oh, be gone. By heaven, I love thee better than myself, for I come hither armed against myself. Stay not, be gone, live, and hereafter say, a madman's mercy bid thee run away.
I do defy thy conjuration, and apprehend thee for a felon here.
Why, wilt thou provoke me, then have at thee, boy!
I will now call the watch.
I am slain. If thou be merciful, open the tomb, lay me with Juliet. In faith I will. Let me peruse this face. Mercutio's kinsman, noble county Paris. What said my man when my betossed soul did not attend him as we rode? I think he told me Paris should have married Juliet. Said he not so? Or did I dream it so? Or am I mad, hearing him talk of Juliet to think it was so? Oh, give me thy hand. One rid with me in sour misfortune's book. I'll bury thee in a triumphant grave.
So Paris dies at the hands of Romeo, very similar to what happened between Romeo and Tybalt. Take a look at the modern translation of Romeo's dialogue. He says, "All right, I will. Paris's request is to be laid to rest next to Juliet." Romeo says, let me look at this face. It's Mercutio's relative, noble Count Paris. So remember that it was very dark, and Count Paris didn't want to have a torch, so anyone that was there wouldn't be able to see him. And now, with Romeo's torch, he's able to see that the person he was fighting was Count Paris. So he says, "What did my man say? I was so worried, so I wasn't listening to him while we were riding. I think he told me Paris was about to marry Juliet. Isn't that what he said? Or was I dreaming? Or am I crazy? Did I hear him say something about Juliet and jump to conclusions? Give me your hand. Both of us had such bad luck. I'll bury you in a magnificent grave." So Romeo learned that Count Paris wanted to marry Juliet from Balthasar, but he really wasn't thinking too much about what that really meant. He was just concerned with arriving at Juliet's grave and killing himself. So take a look. Romeo now opens the tomb to reveal Juliet inside.
A grave. Oh, no. A lantern slaughtered youth. For here lies Juliet, and her beauty makes this vault a feasting presence full of light. Death, lie thou there, by a dead man interred. How oft, when men are at the point of death, have they been merry which their keepers call a lightning before death? Oh, how may I call this a lightning? Oh, my love, my wife, death that hath sucked the honey of thy breath hath had no power yet upon thy beauty. Thou art not conquered. Beauty's ensign yet is crimson in thy lips and in thy cheeks, and
flag is not advanced there. Tybalt, liest thou there in thy bloody sheet? Oh, what more favour can I do to thee than with that hand that cut thy youth in twain to sunder his that was thine enemy? Forgive me, cousin. Ah, dear Juliet, why art thou yet so fair? Shall I believe that unsubstantial death is amorous, and that the lean abhorred monster keeps thee here in dark to be his paramour? For fear of that, I still will stay with thee, and never from this pallet of dim night depart again. Here will I remain with worms that are thy chambermaids. Here will I set up my everlasting rest, and shake the yoke of inauspicious stars from this world-wearied flesh. Eyes, look your last. Arms, take your last embrace, and lips, oh, you. The doors of breath seal with a righteous kiss a dateless bargain to engrossing death. Come, bitter conduct, come, unsavory guide, thou desperate pilot, now at once run on the dashing rocks thy sea-sick, weary bark. Kiss to my love. Oh, true apothecary, thy drugs are quick. Thus, with a kiss, I die.
So Romeo dies at this point, and he had a very long soliloquy here as he entered Juliet's grave, her tomb, and saw her there. Let's take a look at the modern translation and look at a couple of things that he says here. So he goes, how often are men happy right before they die? They call it the lightness before death. Oh, how can I call this lightness? Oh, my love, my wife, death has sucked the honey from your breath, but it has not yet ruined your beauty. You haven't been conquered. There is still red in your lips and in your cheeks. Death has not yet turned them pale. So this would make sense because Juliet is supposed to be waking up. So maybe a few hours prior to this, Juliet looked very pale, very much dead. But as the potion is wearing off, remember that Juliet is supposed to begin to look more lively. So Romeo finds this to be strange. And so he says, there is still red in your lips and in your cheeks. Death has not yet turned them pale. He then looks to Tybalt, who is also lying in the same tomb. Says, Tybalt, you are lying there in your bloody death shroud. Oh, what better favor can I do for you than to kill the man who killed you with the same hand that made you die young? Forgive me, cousin. Oh, dear Juliet, why are you still so beautiful? Should I believe that death is in love with you, and that the awful monster keeps you here to be his mistress? So you notice again that Romeo is personifying death. Lord Capulet did the same thing earlier when he found Juliet dead in her bed. Then he continues on and he says, I don't like that idea, the idea that death is keeping Juliet as his mistress. So I'll stay with you, and I will never leave this tomb. Here I'll remain with worms that are your chambermaids. Oh, I'll rest here forever. I'll forget about all the bad luck that has troubled me. Eyes, look out for the last time. Arms, make your last embrace. And lips, you are the doors of breath. Seal with a righteous kiss the deal I have made with death forever. And if you notice here, Romeo kisses Juliet and takes out the poison. He says, "Come, bitter poison, come, unsavory guide. You desperate pilot, let's crash the seaworthy ship into the rocks. Here's to my love." And Romeo drinks the poison. And it begins to take very quick effect, which is what Romeo had requested. He says, "Oh, that apothecary was honest. His drugs work quickly, so I die with a kiss." And Romeo then dies. Remember that Juliet is still alive, and she's supposed to be waking up any moment now. Let's take a look at the rest of the scene.
St. Francis be my speed. Oh, how oft tonight have my old feet stumbled to graves. Who's there?
Here's one, a friend, and one that knows you well.
Bliss be upon you. Tell me, good my friend, what torch is yond, that vainly lends his light to grubs and eyeless skulls? As I discern, it burneth in the Capel's monument.
That's so, holy sir, and there's my master, one that you love.
Who is it?
Romeo.
How long hath he been there?
Full half an hour.
Go with me to the vault.
Dare not, sir. My master knows not, but I am gone hence, and fearfully did menace me with death if I did stay to look on his intent.
Stay then, I'll go alone. Fear comes upon me, oh much I fear some ill unthrifty thing.
As I did sleep under...
So, Friar Lawrence has just learned that Romeo has made his way back to Verona, and he's inside Capulet's tomb. Friar Lawrence becomes a little bit afraid of that, and he says, "Much I fear some ill unthrifty thing." So what is it that Friar Lawrence could be afraid of when he enters the tomb?
This yew tree here, I dreamt my master and another forged, and that my master slew him.
Romeo? What blood is this which stains the stony entrance of this sepulchre? On these masterless and gory swords, to lie discoloured by this place of peace. Romeo? Oh, pale. Who else? What, Paris too, and steeped in blood? Oh, what an unkind hour is guilty in this lamentable chance. The lady stirs.
Oh, comfortable friar, where is my lord? I do remember well where I should be, and there I am. Where is my Romeo?
I hear some noise, lady. Come from that nest of death, contagion, and unnatural sleep. A greater power than we can contradict hath thwarted our intents. Come away. Thy husband in thy bosom there lies dead. And Paris, too. Come, I dispose of thee among a sisterhood of holy nuns. Stay not to question, for the watch is coming. Come, go, good Juliet. I dare no longer stay.
Oh, get thee hence, for I will not away. What's here? A cup closed in my true love's hand. Poison, I see, hath been his timeless end. O child, drunk all and left no friendly drop to help me after. I will kiss thy lips. Haply some poison yet doth hang on them to make me die with a restorative. Thy lips are warm.
So Juliet does not want to leave the tomb. As she's waking up, Friar Lawrence tells her that Romeo has been lying next to her and he's dead, and so is Count Paris. And Friar Lawrence says the only solution he has at this point is to bring Juliet to a convent. She, however, decides to stay. Let's take a look at the modern translation of Juliet's dialogue. She says, what's this here? It's a cup, closed in my true love's hand. Poison, I see, that has been the cause of his death. How rude. He drank it all and didn't leave any to help me afterward. I will kiss your lips. Perhaps there's still some potion on them to make me die with a medicinal kiss. And she kisses Romeo. But then she realizes that his lips are warm. So notice that she goes and she says that he drank it all and didn't leave any for me. So Juliet's plan is to drink any of the leftover poison so that she can die with Romeo. And as she's doing this, a watchman enters with Paris's page.
Yea, noise, and I'll be brief. Oh, happy dagger, this is thy sheath. Ah! There rust, and let me die. Ah!
So let's take a look at the modern translation. Because there is no poison left in the cup, Juliet then needs to come up with a new solution. So she hears people coming and she says she needs to act quickly. So she takes a knife and she stabs herself and kills herself lying next to Romeo. While this is happening, the page enters.
This is the place. There, where the torch doth burn. The ground is bloody. Search about the churchyard. Go, some of you. Whoever you find, attach. Pitiful sight. Here lies the Canty slain, and Juliet bleeding. Warm and newly dead, who here hath lain this 2 days buried. Go, tell the prince, run to the Capulets, raise up the Montagues, some other search. We see the ground whereon these woes do lie, but the true ground of all these piteous woes we cannot without circumstance descry.
Here's Romeo's man. We found him in the churchyard.
Hold him in safety till the prince come hither.
Here is a friar that trembles, sighs, and weeps. We took this mattock and this spade from him as he was coming from this churchyard side.
A great suspicion. Stay the friar too.
What misadventure is so early up that calls our person from our morning rest?
What should it be that is so shrieked abroad?
All the people in the street cried Romeo, some Juliet and some Paris, and all run with open outcry toward our monument.
What fear is this which startles in your ears?
Sovereign, here lies the County Paris slain, and Romeo dead, and Juliet dead before, warm and new killed.
Search.
So a lot of information is being processed very quickly. The watchman has the prince as well as the Capulets arrive at the Capulet vault, the tomb, and he goes and he informs them that Romeo is dead, Count Paris is also slain, and Juliet, who was dead before, is now warm and newly killed. Therefore, he's telling them that Romeo has died and Juliet died now, although they believe she was already dead.
Seek, and know how this foul murder comes.
Here is a friar, and slaughtered Romeo's man, with instruments upon them fit to open these dead men's tombs.
Poor heavens. Oh, wife, look how our daughter bleeds. This dagger hath misstained, for lo, his house is empty on the back of Montague, and it missheathed in my daughter's bosom.
Oh me, this sight of death is as a bell that warns my old age to a sepulchre.
Come, Montague, for thou art early up to see thy son and heir more early down.
Alas, my liege, my wife is dead tonight. Grief of my son's exile hath stopped her breath. What further woe conspires against mine age?
Look.
So the Capulets believe that Romeo came to harm the Capulet tomb, and as they're saying this, Montague arrives, and he informs us, and the prince, that his wife has just died as well. So you have Count Paris, Romeo, Juliet, and Romeo's mother, Lord Montague's wife, Lady Montague. And Lord Montague informs us that it was the grief of knowing that her son was exiled that caused her to die. And take a look at what the prince says.
And thou shalt see.
O thou untaught, what manners is in this to press before thy father to a grave?
Seal up the mouth of outrage for a while till we can clear these ambiguities and know their spring, their head, their true descent. And then will I be general of your woes and lead you even to death. Meantime, forbear and let mischance be slave to patience. Bring forth the parties of suspicion.
I am the greatest, able to do least, yet most suspected, as the time and place doth make against me of this direful murder. And here I stand both to impeach and purge, myself condemned and myself excused.
Then say at once what thou dost know in this.
So the prince has asked Friar Lawrence to come and explain what it is that he knows. They stop Friar Lawrence on his way out of the tomb, and he says, I know the greatest amount of information, but I could do the least amount. And he says, you can go ahead and be angry with me, you can punish me, I've already condemned myself and also forgiven myself. So Friar Lawrence is going to go into a very long speech, and when a character gives a very long speech to the other characters, it's known as a monologue.
I will be brief, for my short date of breath is not so long as is a tedious tale. Romeo, there dead, was husband to that Juliet, and she there dead, that Romeo's faithful wife. I married them, and their stolen marriage day was Tybalt's doomsday, whose untimely death banished the new-made bridegroom from the city, for whom, and not for Tybalt, Juliet pined. You, to remove that siege of grief from her, betrothed then would have married her perforce to County Paris. Then comes she to me, and with wild looks bid me devise some mean to rid her from this second marriage, or in my cell there would she kill herself. Then gave I her, so tutored by my art, a sleeping potion, which so took effect as I intended, for it wrought on her the form of death. Meantime I writ to Romeo that he should hither come as this dire night, to help to take her from her borrowed grave, being the time the potion's force should cease. But he which bore my letter, Friar John, was stayed by accident, and yesternight returned my letter back. Then, all alone, at the prefixed hour of her waking, came I to take her from her kindred's vault, meaning to keep her closely at my cell, till I conveniently could send to Romeo. But when I came, some minute ere the time of her awakening, here untimely lay the noble Paris and true Romeo, dead. She wakes, and I entreated her come forth and bear this work of heaven with patience. But then a noise did scare me from the tomb, and she, too desperate, would not go with me, but as it seems, did violence on herself. All this I know, and to the marriage her nurse is privy. And if aught in this miscarried by my fault, let my old life be sacrificed some hour before his time, unto the rigour of severest law.
We still have known thee for a holy man. Where's Romeo's man? What can he say in this?
I brought my master news of Juliet's death, and then in post he came from Mantua, to this same place, to this same monument. This letter he early bid me give his father, and threatened me with death going in the vault if I departed not and left him there.
Give me the letter. I will look on. Where is the county's page that raised the watch? Sirrah! What made your master in this place?
He came with flowers to strew his lady's grave, and bid me stand aloof, and so I did. Anon comes one with light to ope the tomb, and by my master drew on him, and then I ran away to call the watch.
This letter doth make good the friar's words, their course of love, the tidings of her death. And here he writes that he did buy a poison of a poor apothecary, and therewithal came to this vault to die, and lie with Juliet. Where be these enemies? Capulet, Montague, see what a scourge is laid upon your hate, that heaven finds means to kill your joys with love. And I, for winking at your discords too, have lost a brace of kinsmen. All are punished.
Oh, Brother Montague.
So the prince skims the letter. If we take a look at the modern translation, and unfortunately in this tragedy, none of the letters are ever delivered on time. And the letter confirms everything that Friar Lawrence has said. The letter indicates that Romeo bought poison to kill himself, and it also informs them that he loves Juliet, and he wanted to go and die and lie next to her. After reading the letter, the prince calls over the Capulets and the Montagues, and he says, "Do you see what a great evil results from your hate? Heaven has figured out how to kill your joys with love. Because I looked the other way when your feud flared up, I've lost several members of my family as well. Everyone is punished." So let's see how Capulets and Montagues are going to respond to this.
Give me thy hand. This is my daughter's jointure, for no more can I demand.
But I can give thee more, for I will raise her statue in pure gold, that whilst Verona by that name is known, there shall no figure at such rate be set, as that of true and faithful Juliet.
As rich are Romeo's by his lady's lie, poor sacrifices of our enmity.
So I want you guys to think about the prologue and how out of the love of these two children, the feud is finally over. Capulet calls Montague his brother, and Montague says in order to remember the life of Juliet, he's going to raise a statue of pure gold, and he is going to leave it in the city of Verona. Lord Capulet says that he will then make one of Romeo so that it can lay beside Juliet's.
A glooming peace this morning with it brings. The sun, for sorrow, will not show his head. Go hence to have more talk of these sad things. Some shall be pardoned, and some punished. For never was a story of more woe than this of Juliet and her Romeo.
And that brings us to the end of Romeo and Juliet.